Mr. Welch.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Mr. Cohen, first of all, I want to say that my understanding is that you don't seek to be doing surveillance in a manner that Mr. Stewart and I think all of us object to. Is that correct?
Yes, Congressman, that is correct. And in fact, there are significant restrictions on the use of intelligence community collection platforms within the domestic environment. So we're not talking about using the awesome power of the NSA against U.S. persons while they're in the United States as we engage in identifying threats of violence.
Okay, Mr. Langen, same thing. I mean, you have different authorities at the, go ahead.
Yes, no, I concur with that as well.
All right. Let me just ask Mr. Cohen about, in September 18, there were radical right-wing supporters of the January 6 insurrectionists gathered at the Capitol, and you've testified that there was similar traffic on public-facing websites to what was seen before January 6, but there was no similar level of violence. Why do you assess there was less violence at that event?
So that's a really interesting question, Congressman. And I think it provides a good illustration of what we are doing, what we're not doing. As we were evaluating activity on online communities and platforms commonly used by violent domestic extremists, we saw discussions that focused on an event to be held in Washington, D.C. on September 18th. Initially, we did not see any references to violence, so we did not collect information, we did not disseminate information until we began to see woven into those conversations specific calls for violent and illegal acts. The kidnapping of a member of Congress, the attack of liberal churches, attacks against Jewish facilities. We began seeing calls by counter-protesters to come to D.C. and engage in violent acts. When we began seeing a nexus with violent activity, that is when we began working closely with the FBI. We began additional analysis. We worked with state and locals, and we issued public statements referring to the potential threat. And to some degree, what we have come to believe is that our focus on these events and the security measures that are put in place in response actually serves as a deterrent effect to acts of violence.
Thank you. And what about just the process of sharing information in partnerships with state and local governments where we get a database of what these threats are? Can you address the need to do that, have better and more reliable statistics?
Well, I'll defer to the Assistant Director to talk about it from an investigative perspective, but as I mentioned in my opening statement, there are examples where acts of violence, acts of targeted violence had been prevented by threat management strategies employed at the local level. So it is critical that local authorities, whether it be law enforcement or others, have an understanding of the threat, have an understanding of the behavioral indicators associated with a threat, so they can recognize those behaviors and those indicators should they be present in their community.
So would it be helpful to basically institutionalize a reporting requirement at the state and local level so that that information is available and not just sometimes made available?
I believe it would be.
Anything to add?
No, I think that could be useful, sir. I think as far as sharing and disseminating information currently, the foundation of which we use it are our GTTFs, which we have over 200 throughout the country, and then in addition, producing intelligence products that go out to a much wider distributed audience as well.
You know, I share the concern expressed by my Republican colleagues about individual rights and civil liberties. And we don't have that much time, so I'll start with you, Mr. Cohen. What are the agencies doing to ensure that individual civil rights and civil liberties are protected?
My analysts and the individuals who engage in information gathering, they have to receive training so that they're able to distinguish between constitutionally protected activity and that may be threat related. We have extensive oversight that involves our lawyers from the Intelligence Law Division, our Intelligence Community Oversight Officer, but also our privacy and our civil rights and civil liberties officers. I say this, and I mean this, as somebody who, again, I've been a police officer. I've arrested a lot of people. I'm very focused on on conducting operations to protect the country. My two closest partners in the department today is the privacy officer and the civil rights and civil liberties officers. Even the perception that we are infringing on people's constitutionally protected rights will undermine, I think as correctly pointed out, would undermine the credibility of our efforts to protect our communities from violence.
Thank you very much. I yield back as I'm out of